It was a small town, quiet and ordinary, where life moved in slow circles. Shops opened in the morning, children ran to school, workers hurried to buses, and old men sat outside cafes sipping tea. Nothing strange ever happened here. Nothing to disturb the flow of daily routine. But that morning people saw something unusual. Under a flickering sign that read "Help Wanted," a woman stood perfectly still. She had been there since sunrise, her tall figure casting a long shadow on the pavement. Her hands rested by her side, her gaze fixed on the sign above her head. She did not move, she did not blink often, and she did not speak. At first, people thought she was just a stranger looking for work. But as hours passed, they grew uneasy. The woman did not leave. Even when the sun rose higher and the streets grew busy, she did not eat, she did not drink, she did not ask anyone for help. She only waited, silent and patient. Children tugged at their mother's sleeves, whispering questions. "Who is she?" One boy asked, his voice trembling with both curiosity and fear. The mothers pulled their children away, saying, "Don't stare, just keep walking." But everyone stared anyway, because no one could ignore her. She was not like any other woman in town. Her hair shimmered faintly, not like gold or silver, but like threads of starlight. Her skin looked smooth, pale, almost glowing under the sunlight, and her eyes, they were the strangest of all, as deep and dark, yet sparkling as if stars lived inside them. When she turned her head slightly, people swore they felt the air grow colder. It was as if she carried a piece of night within her. Even under the bright morning sky, by noon the gossip spread across the town. In shops, in cafes, in offices, people whispered, "Did you see her?" The woman under the sign. "Maybe she is homeless," another said. "No, she doesn't look lost. She looks like she's waiting for something," someone else replied. But no one dared to approach her. No one dared to ask her why she stood there so long. As the hours crawled, her presence began to disturb people. Dogs barked whenever they passed her, their ears flat, their tails stiff. Old women crossed the street just to avoid walking too close. The traffic lights flickered strangely near her corner, sometimes staying red longer than usual. Even the air seemed heavier, carrying a faint hum that no one could explain. By evening, the streetlights came alive, their yellow glow pushing back the darkness. The woman was still there, standing under the glowing sign as if rooted to the ground. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long, twisting in ways that did not match the light. People shivered even though the night was warm. A group of teenagers, bold and reckless, gathered across the street. One of them shouted, "Hey lady, what are you waiting for?" The woman did not answer. She only tilted her head slightly, her eyes flashing faintly. The boys laughed nervously, but their laughter died when the streetlight above them flickered out with a crack. They ran, pretending not to be scared, but their pale faces told the truth. Still she waited, still she watched the sign above her. It was as if she had all the time in the universe, as if nothing could rush her. The night deepened, stars filled the sky, and the streets emptied, yet she remained silent as stone, patient as eternity. Some said she was a ghost. Some said she was a wanderer. Others whispered that she was not human at all, but no one knew for sure and no one dared to find out. Then, just as midnight neared, something happened. A single car stopped at the corner, its headlights sweeping across her. Inside sat a young man staring at the strange sight. Unlike the others, he did not drive away. His heart beat faster, his breath caught in his throat. But he could not look away. Something about her eyes pulled him closer. Something unspoken called to him. And though the town slept, and though the world remained silent, the strange sight beneath the flickering "Help Wanted" sign was only the beginning. A beginning no one in that quiet town could ever forget. The young man's name was Daniel, and for 3 days in a row he had seen her under the glowing sign. Each morning when he walked to work, she was there, standing still, eyes lifted toward the words above her head. Each evening when he returned, tired and carrying his bag, she was still there, her shadow stretching longer as the sun fell. It was as if she never moved, as if time itself did not touch her. On the first day, Daniel ignored her like everyone else. He told himself it was not his business. People had their own problems, and he had enough of his own. But that night he could not sleep. The image of her silver hair shining in the streetlight replayed in his mind. By the second day, he slowed his steps when passing her, trying not to stare but failing. Her eyes caught his for a brief second, and he felt a strange chill run through his veins. Not fear exactly, not comfort either. Something in between. He walked faster, but her face stayed with him. By the third day, his curiosity grew heavier than his fear. Daniel was not the kind of man who looked for adventure. He lived a quiet life working at the hardware store, fixing things for neighbors and dreaming of nothing larger than paying bills on time. Yet something about the woman would not let him be. He felt as if the universe itself whispered to him, pushing him closer to her. That evening, he stopped across the street, pretending to check his phone, but really just watching her. The sign above her head buzzed, the words "Help Wanted" blinking like a broken heartbeat. She stood exactly where she had always stood, her posture calm, her hands folded loosely. People passed her quickly, not daring to look too long. But Daniel could not take his eyes off her. Finally, he stepped forward, his legs trembling though he did not know why. He crossed the street, his shoes crunching against the gravel, each step echoing in his chest. When he stopped just a few feet away, the woman slowly turned her head, her eyes locked on his, dark and endless. Speckled with faint points of light like stars, Daniel froze, his breath stuck. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the deep sky. Both terrifying and strangely beautiful, he forced himself to speak, his voice rough and uncertain. Do you need help?" he asked, pointing awkwardly at the sign above her. For a long moment she did not answer, only studied him with that steady gaze. Then, in a voice soft and uneven, she spoke her first words. Wait, for you?" Daniel blinked, sure he had heard wrong. "For me?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The woman nodded once, slow and deliberate. Her silver hair caught the glow of the streetlight, shimmering like threads of moonlight. Her expression was calm, but her words carried a weight he could not understand. Daniel's mind raced. Was she joking? Was she lost? Was she dangerous? He wanted to laugh, he wanted to run, but something stronger kept him rooted. "Why me?" he asked, his tone half curious, half afraid. Her lips parted, but the words came broken, shaped by a tongue not made for English. "Need home, need trust, need human," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The way she said human made his skin prickle. Daniel looked around, but the street was empty. Shops were closed, curtains drawn, and no one else lingered. It was just the two of them, standing under the buzzing sign. He swallowed hard, his heartbeat loud in his ears. Something about her presence pulled him closer. It was not attraction, not yet, but a deep gravity he could not resist. He tried to think of something normal to say. "Something safe? Do you have a place to stay?" he asked. The woman tilted her head as if the question was strange. Then she shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Daniel hesitated, then heard himself whisper, You can come with me." The words shocked him, more than they shocked her. Why had he said that? Why had he offered so quickly? He barely knew her. He did not even know what she was. But the words had left his mouth and there was no taking them back. For the first time her expression changed. Her eyes softened, her lips curved into the faintest smile. She stepped forward, her movement slow and graceful, almost floating. The air seemed to shift with her steps. Carrying a faint hum, Daniel felt the hairs on his arms rise. But he did not step back. Instead, he found himself turning, motioning her to follow, and she did, silent as a shadow. As they walked down the quiet street together, windows cracked open and faces peeked out. Neighbors whispered in hushed voices, eyes wide with fear and wonder. "Daniel's taking her home," someone muttered. "He's either brave or a fool," another replied. But Daniel did not hear them. He only felt the strange pull of destiny, the kind that changed an ordinary man's life in a single evening. The night grew darker, the stars brighter, and behind him, the woman followed, her glowing eyes fixed on him. For the first time in her long wait, she was moving away from the sign. And for the first time in his quiet life, Daniel was stepping into something far greater than himself. A choice had been made, though he did not yet know its cost. Daniel walked ahead, his steps uncertain, while the strange woman followed silently. The night air felt heavy, the streets empty except for their shadows. Every few steps he glanced back, half expecting her to vanish. But she was always there, walking with calm grace. Her presence was quiet but strong, like a storm waiting far away on the horizon. He did not know why he had invited her. He only knew he could not leave her beneath that sign. When they reached his small house at the edge of town, Daniel stopped at the door, The woman stood behind him, her glowing eyes watching. Patient and steady, he fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling once inside. He turned and asked softly, "Would you like to come in?" She stepped across the threshold without a word, her silver hair catching the warm light of his living room. It was the first time she had been anywhere but the street, and she looked around with curious eyes. She touched the walls gently, as if feeling the heartbeat of the house. Her fingers trailed across books stacked on a shelf. The rough wooden table, the glowing lamp. Each object seemed new to her. Like treasures from another world, Daniel watched, torn between fascination and fear. Finally, he cleared his throat and asked, "Why were you waiting under that sign?" She turned to him, her voice soft but carrying weight. "Because wait for human," she said, the words broken but clear enough. Daniel frowned. "Why me? Why not anyone else?" The woman tilted her head as if searching for the right words. Her eyes glimmered faintly and she whispered, "Because you see." Not just look. Daniel did not understand, but he felt the truth in her tone. Most people had walked past her, pretending she was invisible. But he had stopped, he had asked, and now she was here inside his home. Still, he pressed on. "What do you need from me?" Her answer was slow, careful. "Need home, need trust, need human heart." The room fell silent. Only the ticking of the old clock filled the air. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. "You talk like you're not one of us," he said carefully. She lowered her gaze as if ashamed. Then, almost in a whisper, she admitted, "Not human." The word sent a shiver through him. He had suspected it, but hearing her say it made his chest tighten. Still, she looked fragile, not threatening. Her dark eyes glowed softly, filled with something closer to sadness than danger. He swallowed hard and asked, "Then what are you?" She hesitated, then said only, "Different." Daniel sat down, trying to gather his thoughts. The woman moved closer, not menacing but curious. Her movements were fluid, quiet, as though she glided rather than walked. She stopped just a few feet away, her eyes meeting his again. "Human heart strong," she said softly. "Human choice matters." Her words sounded like a secret, like an invitation to something larger than either of them. For the first time since she arrived, Daniel noticed something strange in the air. A faint hum filled the room, almost too soft to hear. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. The radio on the shelf crackled with static even though it was switched off. Daniel's breath caught. Realizing her presence was changing the space around them, he stood quickly, unsure whether to be afraid or amazed. "Are you dangerous?" he asked in a whisper. She shook her head slowly, her silver hair moving like threads of light. "Not danger. Unless humans choose danger," she said, her voice calm. Her words confused him, but something inside told him she spoke the truth. Daniel felt torn, his instincts screamed to send her away, to lock the door and forget this night. But another part of him, deeper and stronger, told him he was standing at the edge of something important, something bigger than his small life, something that might change everything. The woman seemed to sense his thoughts, for she whispered again, "I wait for you, not others. You." Her voice carried both weight and warmth. It was not a command, it was not a threat. It was an invitation, simple and strange, an invitation that asked him to step into the unknown. Daniel looked at her, truly looked. She was not human, that much was clear. But in her eyes he saw loneliness, he saw hope. He saw the same fear that stirred inside his own chest, and he realized she had been waiting not just for any human, but for someone willing to listen, willing to trust. Slowly he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "You can stay here. For now." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and for a moment the hum in the air softened. The lamp glowed steady, the room felt warmer, and Daniel felt as if a silent pact had been made. He did not know what he had just agreed to. He did not know what it would cost him. But deep down he felt that everything in his life had been leading to this moment. The invitation had been given and he had accepted, and nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel's house was small and ordinary, a place where nothing strange had ever happened. The walls were plain, the furniture old but sturdy, the rooms filled with the smell of wood and dust. But the moment the alien woman stepped inside, everything felt different. It was as if the house itself held its breath, waiting, listening. She walked slowly through the living room, her eyes wide, taking in every detail. The ticking clock on the wall, the glow of the lamp, the worn sofa with its patched fabric. To Daniel, these things were simple and boring, but to her they seemed new, almost magical. She reached out and touched the lamp, her fingers brushing the warm glass. The light flickered for a moment, then steadied as though it recognized her touch. Daniel watched silently, unsure if he should be worried or amazed. She moved to the bookshelf, running her hand along the spines of old novels and dusty manuals. Her lips parted slightly as if she could feel the stories trapped inside. When she reached the window, she pressed her palm against the glass. Gazing out into the night sky, the stars reflected in her dark eyes. Glowing faintly like tiny fires, Daniel cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Do you need anything?" he asked awkwardly. She turned her head, tilting it slightly as if trying to understand the meaning of his words. Finally, she whispered, "No need. Only safe." The way she said it made his stomach twist. Safe from what, he wondered. He led her to the small guest room, the one he barely used. The bed was simple, the blanket folded neatly, the air filled with the faint smell of old cedar wood. She stepped inside and sat gently on the edge of the bed, her movements graceful and silent. "Here," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "You can stay here tonight." She nodded once, her silver hair falling over her shoulder like threads of light. That night, Daniel lay awake in his own room. Staring at the ceiling, the house felt alive in a way it never had before. He could hear faint humming, soft and low, drifting through the walls from the guest room. It was not music, not words, but a strange rhythm that seemed both beautiful and unsettling. The radio on his nightstand crackled faintly. Though it was unplugged, the light bulb above him buzzed once, then dimmed before glowing steady again. He sat up, his chest tight, his mind racing. What was she really, and why had she chosen him? She had said she needed trust. She had said she needed a human heart. But what did that mean? What kind of burden had he accepted? He got up, walked quietly to her door, and pressed his ear against the wood. Inside, the humming grew louder, vibrating softly like the echo of distant machines. He imagined her sitting there, awake, her eyes glowing in the dark. His hand hovered over the doorknob, but he could not bring himself to open it. Instead, he stepped back, whispering to himself, "Tomorrow I'll ask more, tomorrow." Morning came slowly, the sunlight slipping through the curtains. Daniel woke to the smell of something strange. Not food, not smoke, something metallic and sharp. He rushed to the guest room, his heart pounding. Inside, the woman sat cross-legged on the bed, her hands raised slightly. Tiny sparks of light floated between her palms. Glowing like fireflies, the air vibrated with energy. Faint symbols flickered in the air, symbols Daniel could not understand. When she noticed him, the sparks vanished instantly. She lowered her hands and looked at him calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. What were you doing?" She blinked slowly, then whispered, "Calling." The word sent a chill through him. "Calling who?" he asked, but she gave no answer. For the rest of the day, she stayed quiet, exploring the house like a curious child. She opened cupboards, touched mirrors, studied photographs with great interest. When Daniel offered her food, she only shook her head, though she smiled politely. At night, the humming returned, the flickering lights, the crackling radio, and Daniel lay awake again. Torn between fear and fascination, by the third night, the house no longer felt like his own. Every corner carried her presence. Every sound echoed with her mystery. The neighbors noticed too, whispering when they saw her shadow behind the curtains. "Daniel's hiding something," they said. "That woman is not normal." He pretended not to hear them, but deep down he agreed she was not normal. Yet when he looked at her, he did not see danger. He saw loneliness, a deep sadness hidden behind her glowing eyes. He saw someone searching, someone waiting. And though fear clawed at him, trust began to grow as well. A dangerous trust perhaps, but one he could not stop. One night, unable to hold back his questions, he asked again, "Why me? Why here? Why now?" She looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "Because you choose, not turn away." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of a secret Daniel had not yet uncovered. And as he lay awake once more, listening to the hum of the house, he realized that his life was no longer his own. The woman had brought something with her, something vast, something hidden, a house of secrets, and he was standing at the very heart of it. The days passed slowly. but each one pulled Daniel deeper into mystery. The woman, she had called herself Leora, remained quiet most of the time, yet every moment with her raised new questions. Daniel tried to live normally, going to work at the hardware store, greeting neighbors, but nothing felt normal anymore. He always knew she was waiting at his house, moving like a shadow through the rooms, watching the sky at night, humming softly when she thought he was asleep. Daniel avoided pressing too hard at first, afraid she might vanish if he asked too much. But the weight of the unknown grew heavier with each night. The lights flickered when she was near, radios hissed with voices in strange tongues, and sometimes he heard whispers in the walls though no one was there. Finally, on the fourth evening, he could no longer hold back. He stood in the kitchen, hands gripping the table, and asked, "Leora, tell me what you are." She looked at him across the room, her starry eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. For a long time she said nothing, only studied his face as if measuring the strength of his heart. Then she whispered, slow and careful, "I am, from far star, far sky, not from here." Daniel's breath caught. The words were simple, but the meaning thundered inside his head. He had suspected it, but hearing it aloud made his knees weak. She stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "My people send me." "To search," she said, pausing as if each word carried great weight. "To search for what?" Daniel asked, his throat dry. Her gaze did not leave his, and she answered, "For one human heart brave enough to trust." The words froze Daniel in place. "One heart," he repeated, trying to understand. Leora nodded slowly. "If find, then your world has hope. If not, your world has end." His chest tightened. "End? What do you mean, end?" She turned her head, eyes flickering with sadness, and whispered, "If no trust, then no worth, no future." Daniel felt his hands shake as he gripped the edge of the table harder. "You're telling me the fate of the whole planet depends on me?" he asked, his voice breaking between disbelief and fear. Leora's expression did not change. She only whispered, "Yes." Silence filled the kitchen, heavy and cold, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. Daniel paced the floor, his mind racing. It sounded impossible, insane, yet deep inside he believed her. Everything about her, her eyes, her presence, the strange hum that followed her, told him she was not lying. But the question clawed at him. Why him? Why not someone smarter, stronger, braver? He stopped and faced her again, his voice trembling. "Why me?" Leora stepped closer, her silver hair shining faintly. "Because you see me," she said softly. "Others look away, but you did not." Her words struck him like a blade of truth. He remembered the way people crossed the street, the way they pretended not to see her under the glowing sign. He had been the only one to stop, the only one to ask, the only one to bring her home. Still, fear gnawed at him. "What if I fail?" he whispered, his voice low, her eyes softened. "Then I'll fail," she said simply. The simplicity of the answer chilled him more than any threat could. For the rest of the night, Daniel sat with her in silence. The weight of her revelation pressed down on him, heavy as a mountain. He tried to imagine himself as the defender of Earth, but the thought felt impossible. He was just a man who fixed broken shelves and sold nails and hammers. How could he hold the fate of the world in his hands? Later, as he tried to sleep, the house came alive again. The walls hummed softly. The radio whispered words in a language he could not understand, and the lamp glowed brighter than before. Through the thin wall he heard Leora humming, the same strange melody that vibrated in his bones. It no longer sounded like loneliness, it sounded like a signal, a call to something far beyond the stars. At dawn, Daniel stepped outside, the cool air brushing his skin. He looked up at the sky, vast and endless, and wondered if eyes beyond the stars were watching him right now. Was this some kind of test, a trial to see if humans were worthy? If so, he was the chosen piece on the board, and the game had already begun. When he returned inside, Leora was standing by the window, her gaze fixed on the rising sun. She did not turn as she whispered, "Time is short." The words chilled him, though the morning light was warm. Daniel realized then that whatever was coming was closer than he had imagined. The revelation was no longer just a secret between them. It was a warning, a countdown, a shadow hanging over the whole earth. The morning after Leora's warning, Daniel felt a heavy tension in the air. It was as if the sky itself leaned lower, pressing on the quiet town. Birds flew in strange patterns, dogs barked at nothing, and even the wind carried a sharp edge. Daniel tried to convince himself it was all in his head, but deep down he knew something had changed. When he left for work, he noticed a black car parked across the street. The windows were dark, too dark, hiding whoever sat inside. At first he told himself it was nothing, maybe just strangers passing through, but when he returned that evening, the same car was there, engine silent, headlights cold. And when he stepped out, he felt eyes following his every move. Inside the house, Leora stood by the window, her glowing eyes fixed on the car. "They know," she whispered, her voice low and filled with certainty. Daniel's chest tightened. "Who knows?" he asked quickly. "The ones who watch. The ones who fear," she said, her gaze never leaving the street. Her words made him shiver, because he realized she wasn't surprised. She had been waiting for this that night. Daniel lay awake listening to the hum of the house. Every sound outside made him flinch. Every passing car made his heart race at midnight. He heard footsteps crunching on the gravel outside his window. Slow, steady, deliberate. He rushed to the window and pulled the curtain back. 3 figures stood near the black car, their suits dark, their faces hidden in the shadows. One of them looked straight at his window, and though he could not see the eyes, he felt the weight of their stare. The next morning, Daniel tried to act normal. He went to work, stacked boxes, answered customers, but his mind was far away. When he returned home, Leora was waiting in the doorway, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "They come soon," she whispered. "They ask about me," Daniel's heart pounded. "What do I tell them?" She stepped closer, her silver hair brushing her shoulders like liquid light. "You choose," she said simply. "Protect or betray." That evening the knock came. It was not a polite knock, but a heavy, demanding one. Daniel froze, his breath caught, his body trembling. He looked at Leora, who stood silently behind him, her glowing eyes steady and unafraid. The knock came again, louder this time, shaking the door. Finally, Daniel forced himself to open it. 3 men stood outside, tall and cold, their suits black, their faces hard. The one in front flashed a badge too quickly for Daniel to read. "We're looking for a woman," the man said in a deep voice. Daniel tried to keep his expression calm. "What woman?" he asked, though his voice cracked slightly. The man's eyes narrowed. "She's not from here." "We know she's with you." Daniel's throat went dry. Every nerve in his body screamed to tell the truth, to hand her over. But then he felt Leora's presence behind him, quiet but strong. Something in her silence gave him strength. "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel said, forcing the lie out. The man's jaw tightened, his eyes sharp as knives. "You're making a mistake," the man said coldly. "People who hide her, they suffer." Daniel swallowed hard, but he stood his ground. The men exchanged glances, then stepped back. "We'll be watching," the leader said before turning and walking back to the car. The black vehicle rolled away slowly, but Daniel knew it would be back. When he closed the door, his knees nearly gave out. He leaned against the wall, gasping, his heart hammering in his chest. Leora stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "You chose," she whispered. "You protect." Her words filled him with both pride and fear. He had chosen her over his own safety, and there was no turning back. That night the air grew heavy again. The ground trembled faintly. The sky glowed with a strange light on the horizon. Daniel rushed outside and stared upward, far above the clouds. He saw shadows moving, vast and unnatural. Something enormous was in the sky. Though it was half hidden by the darkness, the sight made his stomach twist, his skin crawl. He stumbled back inside. Slamming the door shut, Leora was waiting for him, her eyes brighter than ever. "They come," she whispered, her voice trembling now. "Your people? Your enemies?" Daniel asked, desperate, her eyes filled with a strange sadness. "My people. They come to see if your world ready." Daniel's mouth went dry. "And if we're not?" Her answer was quiet but sharp as a blade. "Then your world will end." Daniel stood frozen, the echo of her words filling the room. The black car, the agents, the glowing sky, all of it was building toward something he could not stop. He felt trapped between forces far greater than himself. Yet deep down he knew one truth. It all came back to his choice, his trust, his heart, and as the night grew darker, he realized the first threat had already arrived. The real danger was only just beginning. Daniel could not sleep that night. The house shook faintly as if the earth itself knew what was coming. Outside, the air buzzed with strange energy. Lights flickered along the street, and neighbors whispered in fear. But Daniel sat awake, staring at the guest room door, knowing the world he once knew had already ended. When dawn broke, the black car returned. This time there were 2 cars, engines humming low. Men in dark suits stepping out with slow, heavy purpose. They stood in front of his house like hunters. Watching, waiting, Daniel felt his stomach twist, sweat sliding down his neck. He knew they would not leave quietly this time. A sharp knock rattled the door, harder than before. "Open up, Daniel," a voice called. Low and commanding, Daniel froze, his breath caught in his chest. Behind him, Leora stood silently, her glowing eyes fixed on the door. "They come for me," she whispered, her voice calm but edged with sorrow. "You must choose again," Daniel's heart pounded. Louder than the knocking, he wanted to protect her, but fear burned inside him. What could one man do against powerful men and the weight of secrets beyond earth? He turned to her, whispering, "What happens if I give you up?" Her eyes glimmered and she whispered, "Then your world judged unworthy." The knock turned into a fist, pounding harder, shaking the wood. "Last chance," the voice warned. "Give her to us, and this ends clean." Daniel's body trembled, but he took a step forward. He opened the door just a crack, meeting the cold gaze of the men outside. "I told you," Daniel said, his voice shaking but firm. "I don't know who you're looking for." The leader's eyes narrowed, sharp and full of threat. "You're lying," he said coldly, "and lies come with a price." Before Daniel could reply, a deep rumble shook the ground. The men froze, their heads snapping upward as the sky above them darkened. A light, bright and unnatural, split the clouds. The air hummed with a sound not of this world, a vibration that rattled every window. Shadows spread across the street as something massive blocked the sun. People rushed out of their homes, pointing, screaming, some falling to their knees in fear. Daniel stepped outside, his heart hammering. His eyes wide above them, a vast shape floated in the sky. It was not a plane, not a balloon, not anything human. Metallic but alive, glowing but cold. Its surface shifted like liquid steel. The ship stretched farther than his eyes could follow. A giant shadow over the whole town. The sight stole his breath, made his knees weak. The agents stumbled back, their faces pale, their authority gone in a single instant. One of them shouted into a radio, but the static only screamed back. The ship hummed louder, sending waves of pressure through the air, making everyone clutch their ears. And then silence. Daniel turned toward Leora, who had stepped outside beside him. Her silver hair shimmered, her starry eyes reflecting the giant craft above. Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "They are here." Daniel swallowed hard, whispering back, "Your people?" She nodded, her voice shaking. "Yes. They come to judge." The townspeople stared, some screaming, some praying, others frozen in disbelief. The agents, who moments ago had threatened Daniel, now stood powerless, their faces full of fear. Daniel felt a strange calm wash over him because in that moment, he realized the choice had already been made. He had protected her. He had chosen trust. And now the whole world would face the result. The ship shifted again, a beam of light spilling down from its belly. It spread across the street, swallowing Daniel and Leora in its glow. The ground trembled as the beam pulsed, humming with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Daniel felt weightless, his body lifting slightly from the earth. He gasped, reaching for Leora, and she took his hand, her grip strong and steady. The agents shouted, pointing their weapons upward, but the guns flickered with sparks. Useless in the light, people screamed and scattered, but none could escape the glow. It was not just a beam, it was a test, a judgment. Daniel's chest burned with fear and wonder, his voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" Leora turned to him, tears still in her glowing eyes, and whispered, "Now we see your world's fate." The beam grew brighter, the hum louder until the town vanished in pure white. For one breathless moment, there was nothing but silence, nothing but light, and in that silence, Daniel felt the weight of the universe pressing on his heart. He had made his choice, and soon the stars themselves would answer. The story of one man, one alien, and one fragile planet had reached its turning point, and what waited on the other side of the light remained hidden. For the future of Earth now hung in the balance. Suspended between trust and destruction, the beam pulsed one final time, and then the screen went dark.